The night Brooke died in a car crash. Her cat disappeared. No one knew where he went. No doors were open. He was just gone. 4 days later, on the morning of her funeral, he came back, soaked, shaking, and carrying her missing scarf. Everyone thought it was just grief, until the cat led her mother to something buried deep in the woods, something no one else could have found. What he brought back changed everything. It was raining when Evelyn Hart got the call, not the kind of romantic drizzle from movies, the heavy, cold kind that soaks everything to the bone. Evelyn was folding towels in the hallway linen closet when the phone rang. She didn't run to answer. She didn't need to. Something in her bones already told her. Something was wrong. The voice on the other end was calm. Too calm. "This is Officer Maddox with Vermont State Patrol. Are you the mother of Brooke Hart?" Time stopped. Brooke, her daughter, 28 years old. Smart, sarcastic, the kind of woman who always remembered birthdays and drank too much coffee. She was coming home from work. She always texted when she was 10 minutes away. Tonight, she hadn't. "There was an accident," the officer continued. "A head-on collision. Your daughter didn't survive." Evelyn didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just dropped the phone, and everything went quiet. Except for Marble. Marble was Brooke's cat. Orange Tabby, 14 years old, rescued from a snowbank when Brooke was 9. He was part of the family. He slept at the foot of Brooke's bed every night since high school. That night, after the call, Marble didn't come out from under the couch. Evelyn called for him softly, then later more urgently. He didn't come for dinner. Didn't show up when she opened the treat tin. She assumed he was grieving in his own quiet way. But by morning, he was gone. All the windows were locked, doors closed. No signs of escape, just his empty food bowl and the faint smell of rain clinging to the screen door. Evelyn searched the entire house twice, checked under the porch, called neighbors, walked the edge of the woods behind the yard in rubber boots and a raincoat, calling Marble, until her voice cracked. No paw prints, no sign of fur. Just silence. It didn't feel like a cat that wandered. It felt like something else. Like he had followed her. That thought broke her. For the next 3 days, Evelyn prepared for the funeral like a sleepwalker. She spoke to the pastor, chose the casket, approved the flowers, wrote a eulogy. She didn't eat. She barely spoke. Every room in the house reminded her of Brooke, but it was the absence of Marble that haunted her most. She kept a small ceramic bowl by the back door. Every time she passed it, she looked out the window, just in case. It was the morning of Brooke's funeral. A quiet Monday, fog draped over the trees like gauze. Evelyn Hart sat alone in the kitchen, dressed in black slacks and her late husband's sweater, clutching a cup of tea she hadn't sipped. The house felt heavier than usual. Not just quiet, but hollow. She had just placed Brooke's framed photo on the memorial table by the front door. A candid picture of her laughing at the beach, wind in her hair, Marble curled in her lap, when she heard it. Scratch, scratch, soft, rhythmic, at the back door. She froze. It came again. Scratch, pause, scratch. She set the frame down and walked slowly to the door, heart knocking against her ribs like it wanted out. She opened it, and there he was, Marble, thin, wet, coated in pine needles and streaks of mud. His whiskers were bent, his ears twitching. But it was him. Same old lazy eyes, same white patch above his nose. Only now, he was carrying something. Tied loosely around his neck was a torn strip of pink fabric, frayed and dirty, and unmistakable. Evelyn's knees almost gave out. It was Brooke's scarf, the one she had worn the night of the accident, the one the EMTs hadn't found in the wreckage. the one Evelyn had searched for herself at the impound lot. She assumed it had been lost, burned, torn, or buried under metal. But now, here it was, around the neck of a cat who had vanished without explanation and just as suddenly come home. Evelyn knelt down, shaking. She reached for him, but Marble didn't move. He simply looked up and meowed, once, quiet and gravelly. Then, just like that, he walked inside. He didn't go to his food bowl. He didn't curl up on the couch. He walked straight into Brooke's old bedroom, hopped onto the bed, curled into a tight ball, and slept. Evelyn followed with the scarf in her hand. She stood in the doorway, watching him. Her hand trembled as she touched the fabric. Damp, cold, real. How? Where had he been? Why now? She glanced out the window, toward the woods behind the house, and something inside her said, he brought this back from somewhere important. But she wouldn't understand what it meant. Not yet. Not until later that day, when she finally stood before the crowd of mourners and shared the truth, and not until that cat led her back to the place he'd gone. By the time the funeral started at the old chapel on Willow Creek Road, the sky had cleared, but the ground was still wet from the morning fog. The chapel filled with whispers and low coughs. Brooke's photo sat on an easel near the altar, surrounded by lilies, the same picture Evelyn had placed at the memorial table that morning, the one with Marble in her lap. There were neighbors, friends, former students from the community college where Brooke taught part-time, but no one said much to Evelyn. They just gave her soft touches on the elbow, the kinds of gestures people offer when there's nothing useful to say. Evelyn sat on the front pew, clutching the pink scarf tightly in her lap. Marble wasn't with her. She had left him sleeping on Brooke's bed, too exhausted to stir. The pastor began to speak, words like loss, light, legacy, but Evelyn didn't hear them, because all she could hear was the dream. 2 nights earlier, she'd had it. She hadn't told anyone. She didn't even write it down. She saw Brooke, not broken, not pale like in the hospital, but alive, whole, smiling, standing in a clearing surrounded by maples, wearing that same pink scarf. She had said only one thing. Marble knows where I went. Follow him. Evelyn hadn't understood it then. It was just a dream, right? Just grief. But now, holding that scarf in her hands, dirt-smudged, frayed, and real, it didn't feel like grief anymore. It felt like a message. When the pastor finished and asked if anyone would like to speak, there was a pause. Then Evelyn stood. People turned. She didn't speak from the podium. She simply stepped to the center aisle, scarf still in her hand, voice unsteady but clear. I wasn't going to say anything, she said, but something happened this morning. She told them about Marble, how he disappeared the night Brooke died, how no doors had been open, no windows cracked, how she'd searched for him and assumed he'd never come back. Then she told them about this morning, how he showed up, how he wasn't just back, he came bearing a piece of Brooke, and then she said it. I think he found her. A ripple moved through the room, not laughter, not disbelief, something softer, hesitant curiosity. I had a dream, she continued, voice shaking. Brooke said Marble knew where she went, and I think she meant more than just heaven. Some people looked away. Some leaned in. One woman in the back, Brooke's old high school friend, began to cry silently. I don't know what's out there in those woods, Evelyn said, but I know where I'm going after this. She looked down at the scarf. Because if a cat can find his way through that much darkness to bring something back to me, Maybe he brought something else, too. The funeral ended just after noon. Most people headed for the reception in the church hall. Evelyn didn't. She drove straight home, changed out of her black dress, pulled on Brooke's old hiking boots, and stood at the back door. Marble was awake, sitting at the foot of the stairs, tail curled neatly over his paws. When Evelyn opened the door, he didn't hesitate. He walked outside like he'd been waiting for her to figure it out. She followed him. The woods behind the Hart house were old and thick. Evelyn had hiked them with Brooke 100 times over the years, when she was little, when she was in high school, even once after college, but she hadn't gone out there since the accident. Marble led with steady steps, weaving through the underbrush like he knew every branch. Half a mile in, the trees opened into a small, sunlit clearing, one Evelyn hadn't seen in years. It hit her instantly. This was the place from her dream. A maple tree stood tall in the center. Its roots coiled out like fingers, and at its base was a small dip in the ground, freshly disturbed. A hollow. Marble padded straight to it and sat down. Evelyn crouched slowly. Her knees creaked, her hands shook. Inside the hollow was a small bundle, lightly covered with leaves and bits of bark. She cleared it gently. A second scarf. Brooke's childhood scarf. The faded one with tiny stitched daisies, and underneath it, in a plastic freezer bag sealed tight, a photograph. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. It was a photo she had never seen. Brooke, maybe 10 years old, standing right in this clearing, grinning ear to ear. Her arms wrapped tightly around a small orange kitten, Marble, not yet grown. Both of them looking directly into the camera. On the back, in Brooke's handwriting, "The place I found him. The place he'll always find me." Evelyn pressed the photo to her chest and sobbed. Not from grief, but from release, from connection, from the impossible beauty of it all. Marble meowed softly, walked to her and rubbed against her knee. She looked down at him. "You brought her home," she whispered. Later that evening, she framed the photo and placed it next to Brooke's on the mantel. The two of them, then and now, together in a way no one could explain. People would talk about the cat for years, how he vanished the night Brooke died, how he came back the day she was buried, and how he led her mother to a forgotten clearing, where something sacred waited. Not everyone believed it, but Evelyn didn't need them to, because love leaves traces, even when the world thinks it's gone. And sometimes, a cat finds the path no one else can.